Helen Mitchell looked out the window of room 247 and counted. Not the days till death, as some of her neighbors did at Sunflower Valley. She counted the distance, 78 miles to the farm where Thunder remained, her black beauty who had just turned 22. 78 miles that now seemed like infinity. 3 months ago, when Jack passed, everything crumbled like a house of cards. First, her husband's heart attack right in the stable. Then, her own fall down the stairs a week later, when she was trying to reach his favorite cowboy hat from the attic. Broken hip, surgery, long rehabilitation. And then their son Michael said the words that nearly stopped her heart a second time. "Mom, you can't live alone on the farm anymore. It's dangerous." She resisted. God, how she resisted. But when one morning she couldn't get out of bed because of back pain, when she nearly fell trying to feed Thunder, when the neighbor found her unconscious by the well, she had to give in. Temporarily, she told her son. Just until I get back on my feet. Temporary stretched into 3 long months. Michael hired a boy to care for the horse, promised everything would be fine. Ellen called the farm every week, and each time, Tommy, that boy, assured her Thunder was doing well. But yesterday, Tommy didn't answer. And the day before that, too. Dorothy appeared in the doorway, her hallway neighbor who always walked with a cane shaped like a parrot's head. "Ellen, are you coming to bingo?" Ellen shook her head. Bingo on Tuesdays, dancing on Thursdays, origami workshop on Saturdays. The entertainment schedule at Sunflower Valley was packed so tight, as if they were all children at summer camp. Only children dream of going to camp, while she dreamed of escaping from here. "I'm a bit tired," she replied, and it was true. Tired of the smell of disinfectant, of the eternally playing TV in the lobby, of the nurses' sympathetic looks. Dorothy nodded understandingly and continued down the hallway, tapping her parrot against the linoleum. Ellen turned back to the window. It was raining outside, drops drumming against the glass like hooves on wet ground. She closed her eyes and imagined Thunder, standing in his stall, impatiently pawing the ground, waiting for her. 22 years they'd been together. He was a colt when she first saw him at the auction, skinny, frightened, with a bad reputation. "Don't take him," Jack had said. "He's dangerous." But Ellen saw something of herself in that horse's eyes, pride hiding behind a wall of distrust. It took 3 years for him to start trusting her, and now she had abandoned him. The phone on the nightstand rang, pulling her from her memories. The number was unfamiliar, but with their area code. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The voice was young, nervous. "This is Brady Thompson. I work at the real estate agency. Your son hired us to sell the farm?" Ellen felt the floor drop from under her feet, even though she was sitting. "What did you say?" "The farm was listed for sale 2 weeks ago. We already have a buyer, a company that buys land for commercial development. They're ready to pay cash. The deal can be closed next week." "And what about the horse?" Her voice trembled. The pause on the other end was too long. "I was told that all property matters at the farm would be resolved before the sale. The buyers want clean land, without obligations." Ellen hung up without saying goodbye. Her hands were shaking, but not from old age, from fury. Michael had lied to her. All these months he'd been planning to sell the farm, sell their home, their life, and Thunder. She knew what resolve the matter meant for an old horse, the slaughterhouse, or euthanasia if he was lucky. Ellen stood up from her chair more sharply than her body allowed. Pain shot through her hip, but she ignored it. In the closet hung her old denim jacket, the only thing from her past life she'd been able to bring here. She pulled it over her shoulders, feeling the familiar smell of hay and leather. 78 miles. She didn't know how to overcome them, didn't know how to get out of this place unnoticed. But one thing she knew for certain, she wouldn't let them take Thunder. Not after everything they'd been through together. The dinner bell rang in the hallway. Ellen opened the door and went out, trying to look as calm as possible. But instead of the dining room, she turned left, to the recreation room, which was usually empty at this time. She needed a plan, and allies, and maybe a miracle. But miracles happen even in nursing homes, especially when it comes to saving an old friend. The recreation room was empty, as Ellen had hoped. The TV silently showed the evening news. Soft chairs stood in a semicircle, as if waiting for an audience to a play no one was performing. She sat in the farthest corner, trying to gather her thoughts. 78 miles. Even if she somehow got out of here, how would she get to the farm? Her driver's license had been taken after the fall, for safety, as Michael said. A taxi would cost a fortune, and the driver might refuse to take her that far. Buses in their backwater ran rarely, and the stop was 3 miles from the farm. "Are you hiding from dinner with stewed cabbage, too?" Ellen jumped. In the doorway stood Frank Kowalski, a former mechanic from the 3rd floor, whom she'd only seen in the dining room. Tall, slightly stooped, with hands that still bore traces of machine oil under the nails, though he'd been here a year already. "I'm not hungry," she replied. Frank came inside, limping on his left leg, a consequence of the factory accident that had landed him here. "Lawyer," he said calmly, "you look like someone planning an escape. I saw that look in the mirror every morning for the first 6 months." Helen was silent. Trust was dangerous. But something in Frank's directness, in his calm voice, made her speak. "They're selling my farm, and my horse will be sent." She couldn't say the word. Frank nodded as if that explained everything. He sat in the chair opposite, his large working hands resting on his knees. "How old is he?" 22. "Good age for a horse. Have you had him long?" "Since the day I saved mine. Everyone said he was dangerous, unsuitable. But I saw..." She trailed off, embarrassed by the sentimentality. "You saw a soul," Frank finished for her. "I looked at cars the same way. Everyone saw junk, but I saw what they could become." They sat in silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Then Frank leaned forward. He said quietly, "Ford Transit, 98. It's in the visitor parking lot. The nurses think it was taken away, but I just parked it farther away. Sometimes at night I go there, start the engine, listen to it run." Ellen looked at him, not believing her ears. "But how do you..." "I have the keys. Hid them in my toolbox when they brought me here. Nobody thought to check." Hope, small and fragile as a spring shoot, broke through the despair. But Ellen was a realist. Even if we get to the farm, what then? I can't just take Thunder. We need a horse trailer, documents. Do you have a trailer at the farm? Yes. Old, but Jack always kept it in good condition. Frank fought, tapping his finger on the armrest. The gesture of a man used to solving technical problems. The van will pull a trailer if it's not too heavy. I can check the brakes and... This is crazy, Ellen interrupted, though her heart was already beating faster. They'll catch us. The police, my son? And what will they do? Return two old fools back to the nursing home? Put us in jail? Frank smiled, and his face looked 10 years younger. I'm 73, Ellen. The worst thing that can happen to me is living the rest of my days staring at this wall. And you want to save a friend. That's worth the risk. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Ellen and Frank froze. Nurse Janice peered into the room, her gaze sliding over them. Mr. Kowalski? Mrs. Mitchell? Dinner is being served. We're coming, Frank replied with an innocent smile. When the footsteps faded, he stood up, extending his hand to Ellen. Think about it until morning. If you decide, tomorrow at 3 in the morning, the guards change shifts. There's 15 minutes when no one's at the post. I'll be waiting by the emergency exit. Ellen took his hand, firm, calloused, reliable. Standing up, she felt that for the first time in 3 months, her legs held her steadily. Almost all the residents had already gathered in the dining room. Ellen sat in her usual place, but the food seemed like cardboard. Across from her sat Rose Chen, a former math teacher who could solve any equation in her head, but forgot her children's names. Next to her, Arthur Green, who told the same stories about the Korean War. But today, Ellen looked at them differently. Rose was small and thin. She could easily squeeze through tight spaces. Arthur, despite his 80 years, still had military bearing and could navigate in the dark. Ellen, why aren't you eating? Dorothy with the parrot cane leaned toward her. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm thinking about the future, Ellen replied. At our age, it's better to think about the past, Dorothy sighed. At least it definitely won't change. But Ellen disagreed. The past had created her present. The years with Jack, the farm, Thunder. And now this past gave her strength to fight for the future, even if it was measured not in years, but in days or hours. After dinner, she went to her room, but didn't go to bed. Instead, she took out an old photo album, the only one they'd allowed her to bring. In the pictures, Jack smiled, young and strong. Here they were together at the new farm. Here was Thunder, a colt with big, frightened eyes. And here was the last photo. Last Christmas. Jack holding Thunder's bridle, both looking at the camera, and in the horse's eyes, complete trust. Ellen closed the album. The decision had been made even before Frank offered help. She couldn't save Jack from a heart attack, couldn't save herself from old age, but she would save Thunder. At 2 in the morning, she began packing. Not many things. Medicines, a warm sweater, Jack's photograph, money hidden in the lining of her purse, untouched cash for a rainy day. Well, that day had come. At 2:30, she opened the door. The corridor was empty. Only the distant light from the duty post created long shadows. Ellen took a step, then another. The floor under her feet seemed unsteady, like a ship's deck in a storm. But she walked forward, because somewhere out there, 78 miles away, an old horse was waiting for her. And she wasn't going to disappoint him. Not this time. The emergency exit was at the end of the West Wing, past the physical therapy room and the chapel that smelled perpetually of lilies. Ellen moved through the shadows, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. Every few steps she paused, listening for footsteps, for the squeak of a medicine cart, for anything that might signal discovery. At 2:45, she reached the exit. Frank wasn't there yet. Ellen pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering so loud she was certain the night nurse would hear it 3 floors away. The red exit sign cast an eerie glow, making everything look like a scene from an old noir film Jack used to love. Going somewhere? Ellen nearly screamed. Dorothy stood behind her, parrot-headed cane in hand, wearing a purple tracksuit and tennis shoes. Dorothy, Save it! The older woman's eyes sparkled with something Ellen had never seen before. Frank told me about the horse, the farm, everything. I'm coming with you. What? No, Dorothy, this is crazy, dangerous, illegal. Honey, I'm 78 years old. My daughter visits once a year. My grandkids don't know I exist. And the highlight of my week is arguing about whether the meatloaf is actually meat. You think I'm passing up an adventure? Before Ellen could respond, Frank appeared, carrying a small duffel bag. He stopped short at the sight of Dorothy. This wasn't part of the plan, he said. Plans change, Dorothy replied. Besides, you need someone who can sweet-talk cops. I didn't survive 40 years of teaching high school without learning how to handle authority figures. Frank looked at Ellen, who shrugged. What was one more escapee at this point? Fine, he said. But we need to move. Now. He pushed the emergency exit door very slowly. No alarm. Ellen had worried about that, but Frank explained earlier that he disconnected it weeks ago during one of his midnight wanderings. Nobody ever checks these things, he'd said. The October night was crisp, autumn leaves crunching under their feet as they crossed the lawn. The parking lot stretched before them, dimly lit by sparse streetlights. Frank's van sat in the far corner, a boxy shadow among the compact cars. Wait, Ellen grabbed Frank's arm. There's someone in the guard booth. Sure enough, the security booth by the main entrance was lit, a figure visible inside. That's not right, Frank muttered. There shouldn't be anyone. A hand fell on Ellen's shoulder. She bit back a scream and spun around. Arthur Green stood there in full military fatigues, complete with a veteran's cap. Couldn't let you youngsters have all the fun, he said with a grin that took 60 years off his face. Besides, I heard you might need a navigator. Arthur, how did you? Rose told me. She's keeping watch upstairs, ready to create a distraction if needed. He squinted at the guard booth. New guy. Started this week. Takes a smoke break every hour on the hour behind the maintenance shed. We've got, he checked his watch, 12 minutes. They moved as a unit, 4 elderly rebels crossing the parking lot with more determination than speed. Frank's hands shook slightly as he unlocked the van, but the engine turned over on the first try, purring like a well-fed cat. "Everybody in," he whispered. Ellen climbed into the passenger seat, while Dorothy and Arthur settled in the back. The van smelled of motor oil and old coffee, wondrously different from the antiseptic nursing home air. Frank put the van in gear, then paused. "Last chance to back out." "Drive," Ellen said. They rolled out of the parking lot with headlights off, Frank navigating by memory and moonlight. Only when they reached the main road did he flip on the lights and press the accelerator. "So," Dorothy said from the back seat, "anyone actually have a plan for when we get there?" Ellen turned to look at her 3 accomplices, Frank gripping the wheel with renewed purpose, Dorothy clutching the parrot cane like a weapon, Arthur studying a road map with a tiny flashlight. "We get Thunder," she said simply. "Everything else, we figure out as we go." "Take Route 47 north," Arthur instructed. "Less traffic, no cameras at the intersections." They drove in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Ellen watched the familiar landmarks pass by, the old Miller farm with its crooked silo, the abandoned drive-in theater, the spot where she and Jack had stopped to change a flat tire on their honeymoon. "Tell us about the horse," Dorothy said, suddenly. "How did you save him?" Ellen smiled despite her anxiety. "It was 19 years ago. Jack and I went to a livestock auction. We were just looking for some chickens, maybe a goat. But then they brought out this young horse, barely 3 years old. He was skin and bones, terrified, lashing out at anyone who came near. The auctioneer said he was headed for..." She swallowed. "Well, nowhere good." "But you saw something," Frank said. "I saw myself at 17, Ellen admitted. Angry at the world, convinced no one would ever understand. My parents had just died. I was living with an aunt who resented me. I knew what it felt like to be unwanted." "How much did he cost?" Arthur asked. $300. Jack thought I'd lost my mind. We argued the whole way home, him in the truck, me following in the trailer we'd borrowed for the chickens. But when we got him to the farm, when I spent that first night in the stable just talking to him," she wiped her eyes, "he started eating from my hand within a week. Within a month, he'd let me brush him. By the end of that first year, we were riding together every morning. And now," Dorothy's voice was gentle, "now he's old, like me. Arthritis in his joints, cataracts clouding his vision. But he still knickers when he hears my voice on the phone. At least, he did when Tommy still answered." Frank merged onto a smaller highway, the van's headlights cutting through patches of fog. They'd been driving for 40 minutes, almost halfway there. "My wife had a garden," Frank said unexpectedly. "After she died, I couldn't bear to see it go to weeds. Spent every evening out there keeping her roses perfect. When I had the accident, when they put me in Sunflower Valley, I begged my nephew to maintain it. He promised he would." He gripped the wheel tighter. "Drove by last month during that doctor's appointment. It's a parking lot now. Condos." "I'm sorry," Ellen said. "Don't be. Tonight, we are saving something. That's what matters." Arthur cleared his throat. Heads up. Police car, quarter-mile back. Everyone tensed. Ellen forced herself to breathe normally as the cruiser gained on them. Dorothy began humming something that sounded suspiciously like a hymn. The police car pulled alongside them, the officer glancing over. Frank lifted 2 fingers from the steering wheel in a casual wave, the gesture of a man with nothing to hide. The cruiser held position for what felt like hours, but was probably 10 seconds, then accelerated past them. Nice work, Arthur said. You'd have made a good wheelman in my unit. I'll add that to my resume, Frank replied. And they all laughed, the nervous, giddy laughter of people getting away with something. 20 miles from the farm, Frank pulled into a 24-hour gas station. Need to top off the tank. Don't know how much driving we'll be doing. Ellen watched him pump gas, noticed how he stood straighter than she'd ever seen him at the nursing home. Dorothy was applying lipstick in the side mirror, humming that same tune. Arthur had spread his map across his knees, making notes in the margins. These people had been invisible to her for months, just fellow inmates in their upscale prison. Now they were her partners in crime, bound together by this absurd mission. Ellen, Dorothy's reflection caught her eye. Whatever happens, this is the most alive I've felt in years. Ellen nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Through the gas station window, she could see the young clerk watching them with mild curiosity. 4 old people in a van at 4 in the morning. If only he knew. Frank finished pumping gas and climbed back in. Ready for the home stretch? Ready, Ellen said. And for the first time in months, she meant it. The last 10 miles felt like 100. Ellen leaned forward in her seat, recognizing every fence post, every mailbox, every porthole Jack had complained about. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, painting the clouds a pale pink that reminded her of the roses she'd planted by Thunder's paddock. That's it, she whispered as they crested the final hill. That's home. The farmhouse sat dark against the dawn sky, looking smaller than she remembered. The front porch sagged a little more, and weeds had claimed the flower beds. But the stable still stood strong, its red paint faded but intact. Frank pulled the van behind the barn, out of sight from the road. They sat for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, everyone waiting for Ellen to make the first move. Tommy's truck isn't here, Arthur observed. That's good or bad, depending. Ellen opened the van door, her legs trembling as they touched the ground she'd thought she'd never see again. The smell hit her immediately, hay and earth, and that particular scent of morning dew on grass. Home, she called softly, moving toward the stable. Silence. She called again, louder this time, not caring who might hear. The stable door was locked, a new padlock she didn't recognize. Frank appeared at her shoulder with a pair of bolt cutters from his duffel bag. Always prepared, he said, snapping the lock in 2 quick movements. The door swung open, and Ellen's heart stopped. The stable was empty. Thunder's stall, the one Jack had reinforced twice because the old boy liked to kick when he was younger, stood vacant. Fresh hay was scattered on the floor, water bucket half full, but no horse. No, Ellen breathed. No. We're too late. They've already... Ellen? Dorothy's voice came from outside. Ellen, come here, now. She stumbled out of the stable to find Dorothy pointing across the back pasture. There, silhouetted against the lightning sky, stood a familiar shape. Thunder. He was grazing in the far corner of the field, moving slowly, favoring his left front leg as he'd done for the past 5 years. But he was there, alive, free. Ellen's knees buckled, steadying her. "Tommy must have let him out," Arthur said. "Good kid after all." Ellen was already moving, half running across the dewy grass. "Thunder! Thunder, sweet boy!" The horse's head came up, ears pricked forward. He nickered, that low, rumbling sound she'd know anywhere, and began limping toward her. They met in the middle of the pasture, Ellen throwing her arms around his neck, breathing in his scent, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of him. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his mane. "I'm so sorry I left you. But I'm here now. I'm here." Thunder nuzzled her shoulder, leaving a trail of green slobber on her jacket. Ellen laughed through the tears. "Hate to break up the reunion," Frank called, "but we need to move. Sun's coming up." Right, the trailer. Ellen forced herself to think practically. "It's in the equipment shed. Keys should be on the hook by the door," Dorothy finished, already heading that way. "I'll get them." While Frank and Arthur worked on hitching the trailer to the van, Ellen led Thunder to the stable to gather his essentials. His halter hung on its usual peg, the leather, soft with age and use. She grabbed lead ropes, his blanket, the grooming kit Jack had given her for their 40th anniversary. "Ellen!" Dorothy's voice was sharp with panic. "Someone's coming!" Through the stable window, Ellen saw headlights turning into the driveway. Not a truck, a sedan. Official looking. "Keep loading," Frank commanded. "Arthur, get Thunder ready. Dorothy, you and Ellen meet whoever that is. Stall them." Ellen's hands shook as she handed Thunder's lead rope to Arthur. The old veteran took it with steady hands. "Go," he said. "We've bought this." Ellen and Dorothy walked toward the front of the house as a man in a suit climbed out of the sedan. Brady Thompson, the real estate agent, looking like he'd dressed in a hurry. "Mrs. Mitchell?" His voice cracked with surprise. "What are you? How did you? I need to call your son." "You do no such thing." Dorothy stepped forward, parrot's cane planted firmly. "Mrs. Mitchell is checking on her property, as is her legal right. But she's supposed to be..." "Where? In a home? Against her will?" Dorothy's teacher voice could have frozen lava. "Are you familiar with elder law, Mr. Thompson? False imprisonment? Financial abuse? Power of attorney obtained under duress?" The man paled. "I don't... that's not..." "Furthermore," Dorothy continued, warming to her theme, "are you aware that selling livestock without proper documentation is a federal offense? That horse has papers, Mr. Thompson. Registration, health certificates, proof of ownership, all in Mrs. Mitchell's name." Ellen caught on. "That's right. Thunder is registered with the American Quarter Horse Association. Any sale without my signature would be fraud." It was partly true. Thunder was a mixed breed, but Jack had always joked about getting him papers to make him official. Brady Thompson looked between them, clearly out of his depth. "I need to make some calls." "You do that," Dorothy said sweetly. "We'll wait right here." As soon as he turned back to his car, Ellen heard the van engine start. Frank was pulling out with the trailer attached, Thunder safely loaded. They needed 5 minutes, maybe 10, to get clear. "Actually," Ellen called out, "would you like some coffee, Mr. Thompson? I was just about to make some." The agent turned, phone in hand, confusion clear on his face. Behind him, she saw the van disappearing down the drive. Arthur at the wheel now, Frank probably securing Thunder in the trailer. "Coffee?" Brady repeated. "It's the neighborly thing to do," Dorothy added, "though I prefer tea myself. Earl Grey if you have it, Ellen." They kept him talking for 15 minutes. Circular conversations about property values and market conditions and whether the original hardwood floors added value. Finally, his phone rang. "Thompson?" "Yes, she's here." "What do you mean the horse is gone?" He stared at Ellen. "You took the horse?" "My horse," Ellen corrected, "from my property. Is that a problem?" He hung up, looking defeated. "Your son is on his way. He said to keep you here." "Well then," Ellen said, standing, "I'd better go meet him. Dorothy, thank you for the visit." They walked calmly to Dorothy's car, because of course Dorothy had driven separately, just in case. As they pulled away, Brady Thompson stood in the driveway, still on his phone, looking like a man trying to explain the inexplicable. Dorothy drove with surprising skill, taking back roads Ellen barely remembered. "They'll be waiting at the main highway," she explained, "but there's an old logging road that connects to Route 78. Rough, but passable." 20 minutes later, they spotted the van at a pull-off near the county line. Ellen jumped out before Dorothy fully stopped. Thunder's head appeared over the trailer's back door, ears forward, calm as if midnight escapes were routine. "We need a plan," Frank said. "They'll be looking for us now. Can't go back to Sunflower Valley, can't stay here." "I know a place," Arthur said quietly. "My grandson has a ranch in Tennessee. Rescue operation for old horses. He'd take Thunder, no questions asked." Ellen's throat tightened. "Give Thunder up again?" But Arthur continued, "You could visit. Hell, you could live there if you wanted. They need help with the horses. Real help, not charity volunteers who don't know a halter from a ham sandwich. It's 10 hours to Tennessee," Frank calculated. "We'll need to switch vehicles maybe." "Or," Dorothy interrupted, "we could make a stand." Everyone turned to look at her. "Think about it," she continued, gripping her parrot cane. "We're 4 senior citizens who escaped from a nursing home to save a horse. Ellen's being forced to sell her home against her will. Her son is making decisions without her consent. You think the media wouldn't eat that up? Elderly woman's midnight ride to save beloved horse. We'd be heroes." "Or arrested," Frank pointed out. "For what? Taking a drive? Visiting a farm? Transporting a legally owned animal?" Dorothy smiled. "I spent 40 years teaching teenagers to think critically. Time to see if I remember how to raise hell." A siren wailed in the distance. Decision time. Ellen looked at her unlikely crew of rebels. Frank, ready to run or fight as needed. Arthur, already plotting routes and contingencies. Dorothy, fierce as any warrior with her parrot-headed staff. And in the trailer, Thunder, trusting her to keep him safe. "What do you think, boy?" she asked the horse. "Ready for another adventure?" Thunder nickered, and she had her answer. "Dorothy's right," Ellen decided. "We make a stand, but not here. Let's get to Arthur's grandson's ranch, safe ground. Then we fight. For Thunder, for the farm, for the right to make our own choices." Frank grinned. "Now you're talking." They loaded back into the vehicles, Ellen with Dorothy now, the men in the van with Thunder. As they pulled onto the highway, the sun broke fully over the horizon, painting everything gold. 10 hours to Tennessee. 10 hours to safety. 10 hours to figure out how 4 escapees from a nursing home were going to take on the system that said they were too old to matter. Ellen reached over and squeezed Dorothy's hand. "Thank you, all of you. Thank us when we get there," Dorothy replied, but she was smiling. "This is just chapter 4, honey. The best stories are just getting started." Behind them, thunder whinnied, long and loud, a battle cry for the aged but undefeated. Ellen smiled. Win or lose, they were writing their own ending now. And it was going to be one hell of a story. The Tennessee state line appeared just as Thunder began his morning protests, a series of kicks against the trailer wall that meant he wanted breakfast, and he wanted it now. Ellen smiled at the familiar sound. Even after their midnight escape, some things never changed. "Pull over at that rest stop," Arthur directed from the van's passenger seat, speaking into the burner phone Dorothy had mysteriously produced from her purse. "Sarah says we're 40 minutes from the ranch." They'd driven through the night, switching drivers every 2 hours, stopping only for gas and to check on Thunder. Now, as pink dawn light painted the Smoky Mountains, exhaustion weighed on all of them, but they'd made it. The rest stop was nearly empty. Frank parked the van in the truck section, and Ellen immediately went to Thunder, opening the side window of the trailer. "Almost there, sweet boy," she murmured as he pushed his nose into her hands. "Just a little longer." "Ellen!" Dorothy appeared with her phone extended. "You need to see this." On the screen was a news article. "Missing nursing home residents triggers silver alert." Their photos stared back at her. DMV photos that made them look like confused criminals. "They're making us sound senile," Frank growled, reading over her shoulder. "No," Dorothy smiled. "They're making us famous. Look at the comments." Ellen scrolled down. Hundreds of comments, overwhelmingly supportive. "Good for them. Nobody should be forced into a home. If they're competent enough to plan an escape, they're competent enough to make their own choices. Anyone know how to help? This is my parents' worst nightmare. Team Ellen, save the horse." "My granddaughter posted about us on something called TikTok," Dorothy continued. 2 million views since last night. The hashtag #FreeEllenandThunder is trending. A van pulled into the rest stop, and Ellen tensed. But instead of police, a young woman with a camera crew jumped out. "Are you Ellen Mitchell?" she called, jogging over. "I'm Rebecca Chen from Channel 9 News. We've been following your story. Can we talk?" Ellen looked at her friends. Frank shrugged. Arthur nodded. Dorothy was already fixing her hair. "First," Ellen said, "I need to feed my horse." What followed was the strangest morning of Ellen's life. As she measured out Thunder's grain and filled his water bucket, Rebecca's cameraman filmed every move. She told their story simply. The forced move to the nursing home, the secret sale, the midnight rescue. Her friends added their own perspectives, and by the time Thunder finished his breakfast, they'd given enough footage for a documentary. "Where will you go now?" Rebecca asked. "Somewhere safe," Ellen replied carefully. "Where we can figure out our next steps without being forced back into a situation we didn't choose." Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. "Mrs. Mitchell, you might want to see this. Your story just went national. Good Morning America wants an interview." Before Ellen could respond, another vehicle pulled up. Her heart sank as she recognized Michael's BMW, followed by 2 police cars. "Mom!" Michael jumped out, his face a mix of anger and relief. "Thank God you're safe. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about saving my horse," Ellen replied calmly. "The one you were going to have killed without telling me." "That's not... I was trying to..." He ran his hands through his hair. "Mom, you can't just run away from a nursing home. You need care." "I need autonomy," Ellen corrected. "I need to make my own choices about my life, my home, and my animals." The police officers approached, looking uncomfortable. The older one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're supposed to escort you back to Virginia." "Are we under arrest?" Dorothy stepped forward, camera crew still filming. "No, ma'am. This is a welfare check." "Then we decline your escort with thanks." Dorothy's teacher voice brooked no argument. "We're competent adults on a road trip." Michael's phone rang. Ellen watched his face change as he listened, growing paler with each word. "That was the nursing home," he said slowly. "They're getting hundreds of calls. Apparently, someone started a petition. 40,000 signatures demanding they release your belongings and respect your choices. The director says," he swallowed, "says you can leave if you want. They don't want the negative publicity." "And the farm?" Ellen held her breath. Another phone call, this time from the real estate agent. Michael listened, then hung up. The buyer withdrew. Something about not wanting to be associated with elder abuse allegations on social media. Ellen felt her knees go weak with relief. Frank steadied her as thunder nickered from the trailer, sensing her emotion. "There's more," Rebecca the reporter interjected. "I just got word from my producer. 3 senior living advocacy groups want to sponsor your legal defense. Pro bono lawyers, the works. They say your case could set precedent for elder autonomy rights." Arthur laughed, a rich sound that echoed across the rest stop. "Dorothy, you were right. Sometimes raising hell is exactly what's needed." Michael looked at her for the first time in months. Not at the frail woman who'd fallen down the stairs, but at the woman who'd driven through the night to save what she loved. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you." "I know," Ellen replied, "but protecting me isn't the same as controlling me. I may be old, Michael, but I'm not done living." He nodded slowly. "So what now? You can't manage the farm alone." "She won't be alone," Frank said. "If she'll have me, I'd like to help. I'm pretty handy with repairs, and I miss having a project." "The house is certainly big enough," Ellen said, hope blooming in her chest. "Jack always said that front room would make a good workshop." "Count me in for weekends," Arthur added. "My grandson's ranch isn't far. Thunder could visit, make some friends his own age." "And I'll handle the business side," Dorothy announced. "Someone needs to keep you all organized. Plus, I've always wanted to learn to ride." Ellen looked at her son. "See? Not alone, just living differently than you imagined." Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Can I visit? Maybe bring the kids? They've been asking about the horse Grandma used to talk about." "Every Sunday," Ellen promised. "I'll make Jack's famous pancakes." The police officers, who'd been watching this unfold with barely hidden smiles, tipped their hats. "Seems like everything's resolved here," the older one said. "Y'all drive safe now." As the official vehicles pulled away, leaving just their small group and the news van, Ellen felt lighter than she had in years. The morning sun was warming the mountains, painting everything gold and green. Thunder whinnied from the trailer, impatient as always. "So," Rebecca asked, camera still rolling, "back to Virginia?" "Back home," Ellen confirmed. "All of us." "One more question," the reporter said. "What would you tell other seniors who feel trapped by circumstances or family decisions?" Ellen thought about the last 24 hours. The fear, the anger, the wild hope that had driven them into the night. She thought about her 3 friends who'd risked everything for a woman and a horse they barely knew. She thought about Thunder, who'd trusted her to save him one more time. "I'd tell them that age is just a number on a calendar," she said finally. "That it's never too late to fight for what matters. That sometimes the craziest thing you can do is accept a life you didn't choose." She smiled. "And that friends can appear in the most unexpected places, even in a nursing home recreation room at 3 in the morning. They convoyed back to Virginia, the van and trailer leading, Dorothy's car following, and Rebecca's newsland bringing up the rear, still filming. When they reached the farm 6 hours later, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors with welcome home signs, local news crews, a lawyer from one of the advocacy groups with papers to sign. But Ellen only had eyes for the stable. Frank backed the trailer up to the paddock gate, and Arthur lowered the ramp. Thunder emerged like royalty, returning from exile, head high, ears forward, surveying his kingdom. He walked straight to his favorite spot by the water trough, lowered his head, and began grazing, as if the last 24 hours had been a minor inconvenience in his otherwise perfect life. "Drama queen," Ellen murmured affectionately. "Takes one to know one," Dorothy replied, and they all laughed. Later, as the crowds dispersed and the sun set over the farm, the 4 friends sat on the porch Ellen thought she'd never see again. Frank had already started a list of repairs. Arthur was planning which bedroom would be his for weekend visits. Dorothy was researching horse care with the intensity she'd once reserved for lesson plans. "Thank you," Ellen said to the evening air, to her friends, to the universe that had given her this second chance. "Thank you for helping me save him." "Oh, honey," Dorothy patted her hand, "we weren't just saving Thunder. We were saving ourselves." From the paddock, Thunder neighed his agreement, the sound carrying across the fields like a declaration of independence. Ellen smiled, feeling Jack's presence in the evening breeze, knowing he would have loved this ridiculous, wonderful adventure. They'd made headlines. They'd changed minds. They'd proven that life doesn't end at 70 or 80 or ever, really. Not as long as you have something to fight for and friends to fight beside. And as the first stars appeared over the farm, 4 unlikely rebels raised their glasses of sweet tea in a toast to second chances, stolen vans, and the beautiful truth that you're never too old to raise a little hell in the name of love. Thunder, for his part, just kept eating. Finally home where he belonged, where they all belonged.